What is the secret to happiness in life? How is it that we can be happy in life? It's a question that's ages old. It is asked of us by our children, friends. Sometimes we ask it ourselves. How can I achieve happiness in my life? And today Jesus answers that question, but first makes it pretty clear that happiness is not a goal for us, but a byproduct of something else that brings happiness. And that is being fruitful with our lives, being productive with our lives. As we bear fruit, Jesus says, my joy will be in you, and your joy will be complete. But there's something that goes into the whole endeavor and process of bearing fruit that he also talks about in today's text. Years ago, when we lived in North Carolina, Colleen and I planted a hedgerow of red tips at one end of our property to mark that in. That summer, they grew like crazy, but that's what red tips do. They are supposed to grow and grow and grow, and almost anybody can grow them, but still we felt pretty proud that we were able to grow these red tips at the end of the season. They were much larger, made it through the winter, and so that subsequent spring, as we saw them begin to branch out some more and create new leaves, we were just so proud, almost like parents, of these red tips. But that early June morning, we were not there to admire them, but to cut them back. Not that we wanted to. It just seemed counterintuitive to us to cut back these beautiful branches. But the book said that we had to cut them back, the book in this case being my mother, who knew a thing or two about horticulture because she had grown up on a farm in Michigan. I know it doesn't seem right, she said, but you have to prune branches if you want a healthy plant. It makes the plant stronger over time. And so, with great reluctance, we proceeded, and she was right. Today, we are told by another book, the good book, about this same thing, except this time it's not a red tip, but us, we who are pruned by the master gardener, God. It strikes me that this is a tough lesson for us today, and that Jesus knew exactly what he was doing and not telling it to just anyone. This kind of talk would have scared away new disciples. This is really higher education, graduate school material. In fact, he is speaking to and only to a select group of students, the 12. And I think pointing this out is pretty important for us because Jesus can say things to them he cannot say to the general public. So this is not some sermon delivered to hundreds of nameless, faceless souls who had never before seen him gathered along a hilltop. This is not some set of wonderful sayings and stories, parables that Jesus gives to random crowds who just kind of gather spontaneously, who haven't seen him before ever. It's not that crowd that he's speaking to today. No, today this is straight talk to his disciples, his followers, his people, which means this is meant for us too. His modern day disciples who have been following him now for many of us for quite some time. What is it then that he can say to them and to us that he really cannot say to anyone else? It's this bit about pruning, where Jesus carefully, lovingly explains pruning as something that happens necessarily so once in a while with God's people. And he doesn't say that we are going to be pruned, so get ready. He says that we already have been pruned and will continue to be pruned, because it is pruning that makes us strong and productive and fruitful. So those of us in the church who call ourselves by his name, says Jesus, have been shaped, and will continue to be shaped or pruned by God, the master gardener. And I'm just wondering, can I get a witness to this from anyone this morning? Who among us in this worship service today, in this sanctuary, cannot look back on his life or her life and not see how at times they have been pruned? Sometimes it comes by way of a rejection. Sometimes it can be a humiliation, a time when we are just brought low, a courtroom defeat, a business loss, a poor or a failing grade at school. Whatever it is that causes us to stop and take a look at ourselves and ask, what just happened there? And what do we need to do? What changes do we need to make so that not only that it doesn't happen again, but that we are better for it happening, that we will have sharper skills in the future, that we will be better prepared as a result of this, that we will become more loving, more just as disciples. Every successful athlete, artist, teacher, lawyer, business person will tell you that failures are opportunities to learn. For the first 3 years of my ministry, I was an associate pastor in charge of youth ministry, and I really liked doing this for 3 years. But after the third year, I said to myself, I cannot do this anymore. I don't know how people do it longer than 3 years. I love youth, have nothing against them. I was one myself. I've had children. That's not what we're talking about, but it's intense, and the retreats and the lessons and the hours and everything wrapped up in youth ministry is not for the weak of heart. And I don't know how Andy Fox does it, but he does it year in and year out and does a great job of it. I am not the man Andy Fox is. So when I decided I needed to do something else with my ministry, it was then that I became open to another call. And sure enough, about that time, the perfect church came calling. It was in the right location. It had had a great history. It was the right size, good public schools and neighborhoods, good compensation, near our hometowns. Everything about it was right. And after I had had the second or third interview with that committee, I knew that that job was mine. I just knew it. And that it was just a matter of time And sure enough, when the phone call came and I recognized the voice of the head of the search committee, I got ready to graciously accept the invitation to become their new pastor. But that's not what he said. Don, he began, we think you're a gifted minister. Now, when they start that way, you know it's not going to go well. We think you're a gifted minister. You have many gifts and abilities. You have much to give to the church, but we have decided to go in a different direction. And I was crestfallen. Those were very, very tough words for me to hear. It took a long while really to get over them. My pride was wounded. I got taken down a notch. But it wasn't too long after that another church came calling, and some others, and then one came that worked and 8 satisfying and fruitful years later. I knew that it was God, the master gardener, who had been at work with that first church, pruning me. I was the better for it. God's no can be a kind of pruning for us, for you, done not to hurt you, but to help you bear more fruit. Perhaps you're going through such a time like this right now. It may be painful, but it is not punishment. Jesus, in fact, says this is exactly what happens. It has happened, and you can expect it to continue happening for all disciples of Jesus Christ. It's just like with all healthy growing things, that just as the hedgerow has to be clipped and pruned each season, just as bodies need to be exercised to trim those pounds and to harden the muscle, so it is with our faith. Pruning makes us better, stronger, more fruitful. And it is in pruning and pruning alone that we discover that we can bear more fruit than we ever imagined. And Jesus says at the end, it is when we are fruitful that we discover the joy of human life and discipleship. It is in bearing fruit that we find happiness. The Bible teaches that life is a gift. It is meant to be put to use and not wasted. We are put here to make a difference in the world, each of us in our own way. To do so means to put ourselves out there, to play and not to watch, to participate and not to spectate. The great high wire walker Carl Walenda, who made a living crossing the world's highest gorges and canyons on nothing but an inch-wide cable, was famous for saying, "To be on the wire is life. All the rest is waiting." Life is a gift meant to be lived out fully and given and shared, never hoarded or held back. And Jesus puts it this way: you and I were created to be creators. That's where the pruning comes back in, the things that seem to set us back, that painfully turn our lives in a direction that we had not planned. Perhaps it is a time of pruning that we might be even more fruitful. So do we want the secret then to a joyful life? Do we want the secret of a life that is enriching and exciting and deeply satisfying? then hear again the words of Jesus Christ. Bear fruit. Make a difference in the lives of others, in the life of just one other. That's all it takes. To look back on a day with joy and happiness, to look back on a life with joy and happiness. Growing up in a small southern town meant that everybody attended the same high school. It also meant that if you took French, your teacher would be Mrs. Sudie Bonnet. Now, for 30 years at my hometown high school, Orangeburg High School, she was the one and only French teacher. So like all good teachers, Madame Bonnet's life was committed to sharing her knowledge of and love for the language. She taught with a spirit and style that could only be described as passionate. For an hour each day, we were no longer in the low country of South Carolina, but on the streets of Paris. Methodically, she would walk from one end of the room to the other, carefully phrasing questions, calling out questions in French to us, and expecting the answers to come back the same way, year after year, that we had Mrs. Bonnet. Generations of students agreed that there was no finer teacher. Some years ago, she got sick with cancer, an aggressive form, and there was little that the doctors could do. My sister, Ann, who lived nearby and who had had Mrs. Bonnet a few years before I had, decided to go by and see her. The nurse at the desk said it would be fine to go back there, that she was seeing people that day, but when Ann got back in there, she found that Mrs. Bonnet really was kind of in and out of consciousness and was not able really to carry on a conversation. And walked in and said, Mrs. Bonnet, I just wanted to come and see you. She opened her eyes, but she really wasn't totally coherent and cognizant of what was going on. She opened her eyes and really could not tell who this was. So she said, who are you? And my sister said, I'm Ann Frampton. I was one of your students. And Mrs. Bonnet went back to sleep. According to my sister, she sort of lost consciousness again, drifted off again, and sat there, really didn't know what to do, but did not want to leave. And then she decided to say, Mrs. Bonnet, I just want to tell you that you were the best teacher I ever had. And Mrs. Bonnet heard that and came back to consciousness and looked at Ann and said, and who are you? And Ann said, I'm all of your students. And according to Ann, she nodded, did Mrs. Bonnet, a little smile, thanked her, and then drifted off to sleep. This is what we want to hear said about us, and this can be said about us by people to whom we have given ourselves, people for whom we have borne fruit, that at the end of our lives, we can know this about ourselves, that as we look back and we see how in our own way we have been able to bear the fruit of God's bountiful grace, there will be joy. There will be happiness. For it is in bearing fruit, Jesus says, that His joy may be in us and that our joy may be complete. Amen.